It's like, hello, folks. Maine has an aging population, first or second, with fighting with Florida over that in the United States. It doesn't take much to figure that we're on a pathway toward like a really, really big cliff here if we don't start doing things differently. And to me, offsite industrialized manufacturing of housing holds the promise of helping to address this issue in a state where you have increasing population, like Maine does, with a decrease in trades workforce. Welcome to Housing Matters, the podcast that covers everything real estate, from buying your first home to building your investment portfolio. Hosted by me, Matt Pouliot of Pouliot Real Estate, each episode brings expert insights, smart strategies, and real talk on housing and affordability. If it's about real estate, it matters here. And today, I am thrilled to have joining us Thatcher Butcher. From KBS Builders. Thatcher is the president of KBS and board member of the Maine Manufactured Housing Board. He has over 20 years of experience with building and construction, where he has focused on building strong teams that drive successful organizations. Prior to joining KBS Builders, Mr. Butcher served as a general manager for Anthony Sylvan Pools, where he oversaw the development and implementation of their overall business objectives, policies, and strategic plans. He previously led T.W. Perry's structural building components business and has held various other positions with Rocky Top Building Products in Rocky Mountain, Virginia, and Best Building Components in Hagerstown, Maryland. Mr. Butcher studied architectural design and building technology at the State University of New York and completed coursework in architecture at Clemson University. He has also completed general management and leadership development training at George Mason University. Thatcher, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Yeah. Excited to be here.
Yeah, for sure. Thatcher, you and I met vis-a-vis my service in the legislature and also a mutual friend who, Sarah Stewart, encouraged me to really come out and take a look at your plant. It's been a couple of years now. I think the first time I came out, 23. And I've been really excited to see your engagement and involvement in trying to promote offsite construction and innovative housing methods. But I'm kind of curious, what drew you to the industry?
So it's I've always been drawn to the construction industry. When I was a little kid, my grandfather built a house, and I think I was attached to his hip at the side during it, and just fell in love with it. Ended up, as you mentioned, going to school for architecture, and I've always just been one of those creative people that love to learn and just really like the opportunities that the construction industry has provided for me. But I was one of those oddball kids that growing up, instead of asking for toys, I was asking my mom for tools. So it was
That's interesting.
It was one of those adventures that were in the making.
But you ended up landing in a couple of different sectors. I mean, you were working with pools for a while, right? How did that land ending up going into housing?
Correct. Yeah. So I prior to that, I had always been working in residential, light commercial wood frame construction, and took a little detour and worked in the pool industry for 4 or 5 years. Got a lot of experience in that aspect. The organization was essentially a large general contractor, and so for me, it was kind of rounding out my experience. Having worked in manufacturing, having worked in distribution, having worked in retail, then having worked as a general contractor consumer. So it was very eye-opening to see the business from that side of things.
So now you're running a company that you're the president of a company that is a subsidiary, right, of a publicly traded company. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
So for all intents and purposes, you're running a publicly traded company.
Correct. Yes.
And that brings with it a whole host of additional layers of responsibility and probably a lot more rigor in terms of making sure that you guys don't miss things, right? Because you're accountable to not only your customer that's getting the product, but the shareholders too.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's there's a lot of benefits to being a public company, and then there's also some added layers and challenges. But overall, it's been a great net positive for us.
Yeah, cool. So I want to start with something before we delve into the world of modular and a whole bunch of topics that we're going to cover today. But I want to start with a note about the past. And this is from the New York Institute of Technology's School of Architecture and Design. Is that where you went to school?
No, I went to school at Clemson down in South Carolina.
Okay. So New York Institute of Technology, School of Architecture Design, Center for Offsite Construction has this Modular 2.0 roadmap, which if you don't have a copy, I'll give it to you. But in here on page 18, it has a note about the past. All the parts will be made in a factory, and the work at the site will consist only of assemblage, requiring extremely few man-hours. This will greatly reduce building cost. Then the new architecture will come into its own. Ludwig Mies van der Rohe in the industrialization of building methods. What year?
So Mies van der Rohe was, that had to be late 1800s, early 1900s?
1924.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, man, you're 100 years early. I read this and was blown away. These are the discussions that we're having right now about trying to address the housing crisis. What gives? People have been thinking about this for ages.
Yeah, it really is amazing, with wood frame construction, how the majority of construction in the United States, over 95%, is still site built. Whereas, just about every other aspect of our lives, the general public has realized and embraced, more advanced technologies. Think about it. If you were buying a car and you went down to the local dealership and, you paid them for the car, the next day they showed up in your driveway with a box truck full of parts and started building the car in your driveway. You wouldn't accept that, right? That would be insane. And it's to me, it's purely amazing, that we still accept that with something that is arguably much larger, much more expensive, and much more complex.
Well, I mean, why do you think that is? I mean, we have really, really smart people that live in the United States. We have the best technology in the world. We have access to the most financial resources in the world. What is taking so long for the industry to evolve around industrialized construction?
Yeah, I'm certainly not a scholar on the topic, but I've spent a little time thinking about that. And the one thing that I can see is other countries, that have more largely adopted forms of industrialized construction, did not have the mobile home style or manufactured home style products that we did throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And unfortunately, that product became synonymous with a lower quality, not very energy efficient, kind of temporary style housing. And I think, unfortunately, modular housing or anything that became factory built just became synonymous with something that was low quality, was higher cost ownership over the lifespan of the product, and it really just created this negative stigma, I think, in most Americans' eyes, unfortunately, about the product. And it's really become an education campaign for us as modern modular manufacturers to work to overcome that. Our factory really is our biggest sales tool. When we take a consumer through our factory and show them what we do, they leave at the end of the tour. I've never had a person leave at the end of the tour not saying, "Wow, I didn't realize that you guys could do that at a factory." This is a much better product than a site-built product. But unfortunately, it's really having to educate people to get that message out there and to overcome that stigma, one consumer at a time.
Yeah, because I've been there now twice, and I think the first time I went, I remember coming in the lobby, and you have a wonderful setup there, tremendous staff, a beautiful facility right in Maine. And you walk in, and I'm looking on the wall, and there's a plasma or LED TV with video showing the saws that you have that you use to cut framing lumber. It's like an automated process, right? And I'm thinking to myself, at first when I saw that, I'm like, oh man, that's taking away jobs, like that machine's doing that. And then I'm like, actually, no, this is making the person whose job it is to create housing more efficient, so that we can create more housing, freeing the person who might be running the chop saw up to do a different job in the factory or be a part of fulfilling the job. And you have quite an operation out there. KBS is really kind of at the forefront of modular construction. Can you share some insights into the process that you use and how, that process is helping to reshape how people look at, particularly single family, but also multifamily housing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the big advancements, for modular construction over the last 20 years has been things like that saw and the technologies that we use to drive that. So, we now have the ability to fully, 3D model a house in CAD software and have that 3D BIM model drive the output to that CNC saw and produce all those parts and pieces. And so, previously to produce, something that wasn't very basic and very cookie cutter in a factory and have those multiple, modular units, those boxes that we bring out to the job site, get craned together and match up in a line on a more complex project was incredibly challenging when all that design and drafting was being done by hand. And so our modern CAD systems and modern CNC saws have really enabled us to produce things that were traditionally done on site, where oftentimes on site they would be working through the complex geometry of the house's roof or whatever it might be to create something that wasn't just a standard ranch style house. And doing that in a factory was always quite cumbersome. And now the technology has really enabled us to be able to produce those same types of products that you would have produced or wasn't feasible to produce in a factory now, and have that all work out right.
Yeah, and I want to circle on this for a moment more, because a lot of times I think when people have a connotation of modular home, they think, first, a lot of them think manufactured mobile home, which we talked about briefly, but they also then think lack of options, no creativity, cookie cutter, only one thing, but that's not what you are. I mean, you're building full passive, in some cases, passive home, net energy, zero homes in your factory, high-end custom properties, $1 million homes that go on the water. I mean, basically, you're a custom home builder inside of a very highly optimized factory environment. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct. That's exactly how I would describe it. We're whether it be vaulted or cathedral ceilings or complex construction features, complex roof lines, we can do that all. And again, all enabled really by the technology.
And you're building the home on a computer software system before the first piece of wood even gets cut, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's interestingly, that's one of the big benefits of modular, but it's also one of the challenges of modular is that as we work to bring builders into that process, we've got to educate them, that we need to figure this all out in advance. Most site-built builders are accustomed to having a rough idea of what they're going to do, but really kind of figuring it out on the fly. It's not that they're operating by the seat of their pants; it's just the way their processes have evolved over the years, and they don't think about picking out flooring selections or cabinet selections or whatever it might be until they get to that stage of the game. And for us, we go from building from nothing to 100% complete, usually in a span of about 2 weeks. So
Really?
it really requires builders to and homeowners, developers, anyone involved in that design and selection process to really put all the effort into that up front, which is a change and one of those challenges that we have to work to overcome. With people not familiar with the process.
So I'm a consumer. I can't find a home on the market. I want to buy a house. It's got some unique shapes to it, design and so forth. And I call you up and I'm like, well, I wouldn't call you directly, but call somebody that can buy from you, a developer, dealer or something. But anyway, I call up. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go, order. How long from saying go to the home could be delivered to the job site?
So a lot of that depends upon that pre-selection process, and if it's a builder / consumer who's kind of familiar with the process and understands that they need to be able to get us those answers very quickly, we can, from saying go to having a project at the job site, can be in a matter of 2 to 3 months. So we can greatly escalate that timeline. We have dealers that do repeat work with us that often do that in about 30 to 45 days. They've got a system that's well honed and allows them to move projects through the pipeline that quickly.
Wow. So theoretically, can't find my home. It's nothing out there for me. I'm switching to this. Basically, like, let's just say really 4 months from now, I could be moving in.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah. It's so kind of 2 to 3 months, and then another month and a half worth of site work, and you've got a completed home.
Yeah. And a lot of times the clients that you're serving, the customers that are buying product from you, the developers or dealers, they're getting the site ready at the same time that you're building in the factory, right?
Absolutely, I think that's one of the big advantages of modular is we can parallel path things. So we can be building the house while the site's being built and graded, while the foundation's being put in, et cetera. And obviously with site built, that is very linear. You can't jump ahead. So.
Yeah, I don't remember the last time I saw somebody start framing a home on top of, no foundation. So it takes really strong teams to get all this done. And your career highlights a consistent focus on team building and leadership. How do you approach creating strong, high-performing teams in the construction and manufacturing industries? And furthermore, are there particular experiences or lessons from your leadership journey that have shaped the way you manage and inspire other people?
Absolutely. So I'm a big fan of shared leadership and shared accountability. So I've never liked working in an organization where it just felt like a top-down structure. I've found that when it comes to driving innovation, driving growth, driving improvement, the best ideas often come from those that are performing those tasks on a day-to-day basis, and ensuring that people at all levels feel like they're involved in the decision-making process, that they have a voice. And that they are, ultimately at the end of the day, kind of determining their own destiny and their own future, I think is really important to developing strong teams. And so that's really, kind of first and foremost how, we approach, developing our team and our organization. I throughout the course of my career, I think like many people, I've worked for some great leaders and I've worked for some not so great leaders. And I think, I was very lucky early on in my career to have worked for a great leader and someone who was able to spend some time and recognized, I think, some of my leadership potential. Previous to that, I had never really thought of myself as being a leader or in any type of leadership role, and I think he recognized some of that potential and spent a lot of time working with me to help me recognize that and help me grow and improve. And I think like many along the way, I've certainly made my share of mistakes as I've gone, and but I've always tried.
None of us make mistakes,
correct,
Thatcher.
Yeah.
Come on.
But always tried to be very self-reflective of those, and try to be open to feedback. And I think that's one of the things that has really allowed me to be successful as I've moved on with my career.
Yeah. One of the things that I've appreciated about you is your willingness to engage in the public policy arena as well as a leader, because oftentimes it's easier to just say, well, I'm going to hold back, run my ship, do my thing, stay in my lane. But you have a clear sense of the bigger picture. I mean, you understand that going further upstream is the way ultimately in the long term to address this issue, or at least that's my perception. And you've engaged in a whole host of discussions that I've been a part of, and some I haven't, on the public policy front. Of course, I'm recovering politician now, but I see you at different things to really talk about how are we going to improve this. And every time that I've seen, it's not, I'm doing this because of KBS. It's I'm doing this because of the whole industry. I mean, you mentioned right in your outset, 95% of the construction in the United States still being done traditionally on site. Unless we start shifting the public narrative around this and get the pipeline filled in a way with people that can perform this work, it's never going to happen. And that leads me to the next thing, which is addressing our need for tradespeople. You and I recently participated in a working group looking at ways in which we can help, get more innovation in offsite construction, industrialized construction to happen. And it seems to me that this was really kind of surprising, but Maine only has like 3 or 4 or 8 installers for modular homes. You have to have a special license to install a home that was built in a factory with tremendous oversight, designed by a computer to the last nail that's going to be put in it. And you have to have a license for that. Yet tomorrow, you and I could go out, get a building permit, and start building a house. It doesn't
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's a giant conundrum, so it's interesting as coming back to Maine, and moving back here in the construction industry as a professional. I was really blown away by that. As I came into KBS and really started to get my arms around the organization and some of the challenges that we faced. One of the things that we identified were just some of the public policy concerns that are really holding back the growth of the industry as a whole, as you alluded to. The issue with licensure being one of the big ones. It really forces builders and other people in the trades that might be interested in modular or other similar technologies, offsite technologies, to take the path of least resistance, unfortunately, and that often does not end up being modular. It ends up being usually the site built route, because, as you mentioned, you can go downtown in Portland and start building a 10-story building tomorrow. Anybody can do it, with zero licensure, and that's scary. But it's more scary that I can, in my factory, I could produce 90 to 95% of a building, the scope of a building, take all the complexity out of it. We even use, say for example, with connecting the boxes together, we use a product called an amp connector on making the electrical connections between the boxes, which are just little connectors that click together, and literally it's labeled number 1 on one box and number 2 on the or number 1 on the other box, and you find those 2 mating wires, you click them together, and away you go. But for some reason, you've got to have a license to do, to set those modular buildings, but that you don't have to build the site-built building from scratch on site. And, there's a lot of challenges around that. I'm not necessarily advocating for completely getting rid of the Maine licensure, but unfortunately, that disparity between the two processes has given, builders, developers, and tradespeople all up and down throughout the supply chain, a massive incentive to go towards a product and a process that is not as an efficient use of people and of personnel. One of the benefits of modular is that it is such an efficient use of labor, and so one of the challenges that we face in the state of Maine, I've heard legislators quote studies that have been done that Maine needs thousands of units in the next few years, and really one of our biggest challenges is from a labor perspective is there's just not enough people to perform that work, and I've seen studies that have shown that to produce an average single family home, it takes an average of 10 to 15 laborers 1 year to complete that product, between all the different trades that are on site. So starting with the people clearing the lot, the foundation people, the framers, all the way on through. When you average their labor, it consumes about 1 year's worth of time of 10 to 15 people. Statistically, on the other end, the flip side of that, one laborer in my factory is usually producing on average 2 to 3 houses by themselves, with the total volume of what we put out. So it's an order of magnitude of difference in terms of the labor efficiency and labor utilization when you look at that. But unfortunately, through public policy, we're incentivizing people to go towards, less efficient means. And that really is been the genesis of why I have, why I've really worked to engage, with the conversation here within the state to try to raise awareness around that and make sure that people understand how their actions are impacting housing within the state.
This is critical. A lot of times the effort is put behind, we need to make more housing. True, we need 84,000 units of housing in Maine. And the solution proposed is, here's more money for the same system that Vander Rohe talked about in 1924, that we're still doing 2024 plus one, okay? Yeah. It's like, hello, folks. Maine has an aging population, first or second, fighting with Florida over that, in the United States. I don't know. I mean, I was in the half of the class that made the top half possible, I was no Rhodes Scholar. But it doesn't take much to figure that we're on a pathway toward like a really, really big cliff here that we're all going to have to jump off pretty soon if we don't start doing things differently. And to me, offsite industrialized manufacturing of housing holds the promise of helping to address this issue in a state where you have increasing population, like Maine does, with a decrease in trades workforce. Now, staying on that, I'm wondering, do people clamor to come work in your facility as opposed to a site-built application, or is it still a challenge to hire? And are there things that you're doing to try to incentivize or promote the electrician whose thought it is to be an electrician on a traditional on-site job to come and work for you, or the plumber, or fill in the blank?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we obviously faced many of the same hiring challenges that on-site or site-built builders do. Just due to the nature of the demographics in the state. It's a very aging population, so there's obviously some challenges surrounding that. But really the big advantage of modular and offsite is that we really are providing a climate-controlled facility and year-round work. With site-built work here in the Northeast, you're outside the wintertime building if there is work in the wintertime. Many builders just take a long hiatus in the wintertime, and all of their trades and their subs have to go find something else to do during that point in time. So, it definitely is very appealing, for people in the trades to come and work in this type of facility. It allows them to know that they're going to have routine work every day. It allows them to work in a climate-controlled facility, and then it also allows them to work close to where they are. I think that's one of the big things that we lose sight of, and relates to some of the efficiency numbers that I was tying to previously. Is if somebody's building a house in Bethel, Maine, well, chances are most of those subcontractors don't live in Bethel, Maine, right? They live 2 to 3 hours away, and they're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to make it to the job site at 7 o'clock, and then they'll work for 8 hours, and then they start driving home at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening and aren't home until 8 o'clock, and that creates zero work-life balance, for them to have a family. And so that's really one of the other big benefits for our team is they can, be putting their kids on the bus, in the morning and getting their kids off the bus in the afternoon. And it's, really, it's allowed us to create a, strong team, to have good employee retention and, to develop and grow a kind of a core group of folks that are helping us as we, bring new employees in. So, you're wondering kind of how we go about recruiting. Oftentimes it allows us to, recruit people, because we have so many people performing so many different trades in the factory. We have more than just one electrician. We have more than just one plumber. It allows us to hire and recruit people directly from trade schools or from high schools that are coming to us with not as much experience, and to develop them and then to give them, room and opportunity to grow throughout their career.
Yeah. And those people who show up to work at your facility in South Paris, right?
Correct.
They're actually building homes all over New England.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're shipping really as far south as Connecticut and as far west as New York.
Yeah. So tomorrow I want to become a framer, and I want to start building houses in Massachusetts. My options are drive down to Massachusetts and start building on site, like what we talked about earlier, or come work for you, and I could build houses in Massachusetts. I could build houses in Maine, New Hampshire, wherever.
Absolutely.
Right? Because you're the nexus of that same service being shipped out elsewhere, right? That's cool. And probably more predictability with schedules for those people that are working with you too, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's we start at 6 o'clock in the morning. They end at 2:30 in the afternoon. It makes it very easy for them to know that they can get to their kids' baseball game after work or whatever it might be. It's not a big surprise, and it really is one of the biggest advantages to modular construction for our employees.
Yeah, that's cool. So I want to pivot a little bit to financing for modulars. How does that? How are you seeing these homes getting financed? Are people using traditional financing methods like they would with on-site, or what are maybe some of the advantages, I guess, from a financing perspective of going with modular?
Yeah, so I think often they are using the same financing tools to whether it be loans or other capital stacks. It really ends up being the same products. It's just often they are accelerated, and so it could be good and bad. Some lenders understand how modular construction works, and they have their draw periods kind of set and work with that, and then it's one of the conversations that we're working to raise awareness with other lenders that don't necessarily understand that. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we start, and 2 weeks later we have a finished product, and so we're looking to collect the money for that very quickly. We've incurred all those costs. We obviously need to get paid, pay our vendors, and pay our employees. And with site built construction, that same process might take a year on site, from start to completion, if not longer. And unfortunately, many lenders are just used to paying out, in smaller draw increments over an extended period of time. And they lenders that are not familiar with offsite construction, sometimes are a little skeptical about, hey, they're worried about fraud. They're worried about the builder taking the money and going to buy a new car or going on vacation with it instead of actually building the house, right? And so they're concerned about paying out so much money so quickly, and it's having to do some education to show them how the process works and why the capital needs are like that. So interestingly, just yesterday we had a local lender in our facility, and we were walking them through and showing them, and they were really enthused about the process and said, hey, we'd like to create a program that is specific for modular construction. Can you help us understand the timing of when capital is needed? And so we're working with them to help them develop that, and it'll be just one more resource in the region for builders and developers who are trying to finance these deals.
Yeah, it seems to me that oftentimes people, I'm talk specifically about real estate professionals, some of my peers in the industry aren't familiar with the way in which to help solve this problem for their clients. I think, usually it's like, hey, we do a scan of the market. There's nothing out there for you. I don't really feel like building a home. Conversation stops. I mean, are there ways or products that you're familiar with that might be available to consumers that could help them look through the lens of using modular as an approach as opposed to just doing nothing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest recommendation is if they're able to find a builder who is familiar with modular, starting there. If they're not, call us. We'd be more than happy to help. We can talk to the real estate agent, the consumer, whoever it might be, and get an understanding of what it is that they're looking to do, and then help them make those connections with a builder that would be a good fit for them, and then we could also help connect them with financing as well too, and so really helping them pull that project together. But the offsite construction industry really is kind of small, tight knit group, and we're more than happy to help people kind of navigate it and learn that process, because as you mentioned, so many people just really don't know where to start.
So when you say a builder that's familiar with modular, what do you mean by that?
So obviously, in the state of Maine, the first one is unfortunately they have to be licensed to build modular, versus site-built builders that just don't need that at the moment. But really, someone who understands the modular process, that understands the pre-construction process, and that we have to we have to cross all the T's, dot all the I's with selections ahead of time, and then mainly the other big complexity to modular versus site-built is somebody who is whether the builder is doing their own set or is pulling in a set crew who's familiar with setting modular units, because that's the really the one piece of the puzzle that's fundamentally different than site-built construction. Oftentimes for site-built, many builders will have a much smaller crane on site, and they'll be flying trusses or wall sections or things like that, but they're not accustomed to flying 60-foot long, 15-foot wide, 30,000-pound box, and being able to make those modular units come together and align the way that they should on site. That's it's a little bit of a learning curve. It's not it's not something that people can't learn quickly, but it's just not something that you would want to have a builder who's never done it before try it without any feedback or guidance.
And the process now, let's say there's a traditional site-built builder, which is like a lion's share of all of them, and they're like, hey, I'm interested in this modular thing, but licensing, I'm not licensed, but I'm open to doing it. I mean, what does that process look like for somebody? Are you familiar with that?
I am. Yeah, it's a challenge, unfortunately, and we're working currently to try to shepherd new builders and help them get through that process and gain that experience. So it's applied for a license. It's taking a test, and then which is not particularly complex. But the big portion of it, unfortunately, is that it requires them to have a specific modular experience, and so that can be a challenge, for a builder who does not have modular experience, it really implies in the way that the rules are written that they shut down their current business and go work for somebody else for a period of years to gain that. And so we're working with them to be able to help them partner with another builder essentially that might have that licensure or another license holder, and to be able to get that license or get that experience in parallel, for lack of better words.
So you do a lot with single family homes, but you're also doing a lot with multifamily as well, right?
Correct.
And I think a lot of times I'm actually involved in a project right now where it's over 300 units in central Maine. And when I first brought up the idea of doing modular with these folks, they were like, that's crazy. Doesn't make any sense. One of the managing partners in the project has been to your facility. Long story short, that project hasn't been acquired nationally. So now those guys are going to push forward with it locally. However, it was interesting because in the beginning they were like, no way on modular, and now it's definitely going to be at least one of the buildings modular. But the evolution seems to really be taking time, in my estimation, largely because the design professionals that are involved in the project, and maybe you can speak more in depth to this with your background in architecture, are loath to really spec out and talk about and design buildings that are fabricated with modular. I mean, it's very much like, hey, we're laying this out. It's a traditional stick-built thing on a podium, and that's the way it's going to be. And there are some constraints with the boxes. Like, for instance, a lot of the low-income housing affordable projects are built on slab on grade. Well, with modular, you can't do that, right? You need to have some kind of a crawl space, or because it's coming with the floor framing as well. And it seems to me that in order to amp this up some more, there needs to be discussions not only with those builders, like we talked about, and getting more builders trained, but would you agree that there needs to be work with engineers, architects, and others that are involved in the planning phase earlier to help spec this out?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's it's one of the challenges, and it's also one of the services that we offer. And it's about creating awareness to that. Is a lot of architects or engineers and other specifiers just don't know where to start if they've not had the modular familiarity. And as you mentioned, it is really important to go down that path early on. Designing. Almost any building can be built, modular or offsite. But to have it pencil out, oftentimes it's really important to have it be designed what you would think of as modular friendly up front. So, shape sizes, etc.
On that real quick, not to interrupt you, but one of the craziest things that was like a revelation to me that would probably to you is like, duh. But in Maine, well, there are some exceptions, I think, with wide load permits. But let's say for all intents and purposes, pretty much the widest you can go down the road is 16. I think in Maine you can do 18, right? With
Correct.
like special permitting and the president's entourage and flags everywhere. But, really 16 feet. So when you're designing a building, you have to have that in mind, like what's going to go down the road, right?
Yeah, and that's really what it's about. It's not that you can't have bigger rooms or bigger. All that can be created, but it's about using increments that add up to and kind of make the most reduced transportation, because it really the largest add-on cost with modular that doesn't exist in site built is transportation. And so if you've designed this building to be kind of divided up in such a manner where it's not modular friendly, you're making too small of boxes, or you're making odd size boxes, you end up drastically increasing your transportation costs, which are a challenge to make it pencil out at the end of the day. And so that's often where it's really important to have a consultant or a modular manufacturer come into that design process very early on to help steer that conversation, because otherwise you just get to the point where you're assembling your pro forma and are looking at this going, this just doesn't pencil.
Yeah.
It really is so it's a challenge with design professionals, and then it's also from an education perspective also a challenge with all the subs and the trades along the way. Again, with modular really only being kind of 3 to 5%, depending upon where you are in the nation, of total construction, there's not as many trades out there, frankly, that are familiar with modular construction. And oftentimes what happens is we've done 80-90% of the electrical scope, in our factory, and the electrician just needs to come out and, hook up the main entrance and make some other small connections. And when they go to bid that for the builder or the developer, they're bidding it in exactly the same way that they would bid a site-built house where they have to do all the work, just because they don't know any better. They haven't been educated. They don't understand that, hey, I'm only going to be on site for half a day or a day, not a whole week doing the full electric of this. And unfortunately, that becomes a challenge too for builders and developers as they're looking to make these projects pencil. Oftentimes they're going and working with the same trades that they've always worked with for site built, and those people don't have that education, that experience. And so it really is for us. It's one of our biggest challenges. Is it's educating people all the way up and down throughout the supply chain and the process on how to effectively work with modular.
I'm working on a project right now myself as a general partner and 2-person partnership to develop 32 units in Camden, Maine. And my partner in this endeavor has been at it for the last 25 years doing low-income housing projects, and he's very successful. And he's doing a project right now for LL Bean in Freeport and many others. And I said to him, I'm like, his name's Tim. Tim, we really ought to have, before we even go to planning board, which is coming up next month, really we should look at this through the lens of using, off-site construction. And at first, and which is what I would do if I'd been doing this for 25 years and had been successful, like, I'm all set, I don't want to invest in the architectural to change that over and everything. There's a wonderful person in Maine. I'll give her a shout out now, Kara Wilbur, who's got a lot of product from you all. And I was chatting with her recently. She's like, I've got some funds available, some grant funding to help with changing designs around, to make them modular friendly, essentially. So I pitched it to Tim, and he's like, yeah, as long as we're not going to have to spend a lot of additional money to kind of re-look at this, I'm open to it. He's like, but in my experience, modular doesn't save any money, and I'm like, well, it can if we do it the right way. And what I mean by that is oftentimes the apples to apple, like hard costs, if you will, of the building itself is not necessarily less expensive than traditional site built, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, it's the shorter time frame on construction, which reduces your financing costs, that can bring down a lot of the cost. And then the speed to which you get to the market, to which you can start getting your rent roll churning to generate revenue. That's where a lot of the savings comes in. Am I right about that?
Yeah, you're 100% correct. I mean, we talked earlier about the labor efficiencies. We use labor more efficiently. We use materials more efficiently. So, when there's 10 feet of extra wire left over on the spool of wire, that goes back on our shelf. And a site built, it's not worth carrying that to the next project. That goes to the dumpster, right? But unfortunately, we have all the added costs then of our facility, maintaining our facility and the overhead of the organization that site built builders simply don't have for a large part. They don't have a giant 100,000 square foot factory that they have to heat and maintain. So really, at the end of the day, many of the advantages of that we pick up from a labor perspective and that we pick up from a materials perspective are offset by that added overhead. But you hit the nail on the head that the benefit to the builder or the developer is the construction time. Truncating that from a year to a year and a half to a period of months, greatly reduces all your carrying costs and other associated costs.
Yeah. So in time with education, it was interesting because we had a call with Kara, and at the end, Tim's like, "Oh yeah, this is a no-brainer," And I'm seeing that happen more and more with developers or even people within the construction industry that are getting that education, which thankfully you're such a huge part of providing in the state, and there are others. However, we will never get there unless people essentially open their eyes to this as a solution and then see it happen. I think that's the ultimate litmus test, right? Like, hey, this particular 300-unit apartment complex would typically take 18 months and it just got done in 9. Yeah. Here's evidence of it, I want to do that. That's how humans are. They want to copy like good behavior, right? It's survival.
Absolutely. No, I think it's eye-opening for people. We were just talking to one of your employees before we sat down, and she mentioned that it was like overnight, on the road where she's building the house, a modular went up, and it was just like, bam, there's a house, right? Mm-hmm. And I think as more people get experience and exposure to that, they'll really start to understand, the potential of the, potential application of the technology.
It almost seems like there's an old saying like, don't let a crisis go to waste. And I really, every day, am frustrated by the fact that we do have a housing crisis. And I so desperately, like you, want to help solve that crisis. But it almost seems like it wasn't until everyone was talking about how the fact that housing is now not attainable and is slowly slipping away at being the American dream that everyone on both sides of the aisle is like, yeah, we got to do something. And it seems now that that is also running in tandem with the fact that in Maine in particular, we have an aging population. We've for decades told people, go and get your degree in, whatever, but don't, become a tradesperson that's for less than or whatever, which is couldn't be any further from the truth. And we've now landed in this unique crossroads of lack of supply with lack of people to do it. And you're either going to innovate and change the way you're doing things, like go from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20% of the way that we do this is offsite industrialized construction, or just nothing happens. I don't know a better way. It almost seems like we're at a crossroads really on this front.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's, for me, it's really exciting to see people, on both sides of the aisle. I think we're all in such a, politically divisive environment right now that there's not a whole lot that both parties agree on. But housing is, at least in Maine, is one that I think, we've seen everybody agree that there's a problem. And I think it really is exciting to see some of the conversations that are going on and, people really trying to engage and trying to, affect meaningful change. Because I think, you're 100% correct. We have this crisis, and if we don't affect change now, when are we going to? Right? When are we all going to get together and agree? And I think there's so many things. I often am very focused on the things related to the operational side of things, but there's so many other issues on planning and land use and other things that affect and impact our ability to deliver low cost housing here in the area. But it's great just to see some of those conversations taking place on so many different topics.
Yeah, and beyond that, though, you all are seeing orders, right? I mean, how's the business looking? Is it flat, down, up? I mean,
yeah, this year it's up for us. Last year in 2024 it was down a little bit. I think that was a little driven by interest rates. End of 2023, everybody expected the Fed to take action, and that was kind of protracted. And then everyone was assuming the rates were going to come down a little bit, and they stayed higher, I think, longer than everybody was expecting. So there was a lot of people that were on the fence and just took a wait and see posture because they knew that if they waited out the rates, they could save a substantial amount of money. So we felt a little softness in the market. Middle of 24, but towards the end of 24, it definitely picked back up, and we're definitely seeing demand in the market rolling into the early stages of 25. Obviously, there's a lot going on politically with tariffs and other things like that have the potential to impact what we're doing. But overall, I think that underlying demand is there if there's not something that really kind of shakes the core of the market.
You just hit it, the T word. I was going to get to it, so it's a good segue. I mean, how does that impact what you all are doing? And furthermore, you're kind of, in my opinion, in a unique industry as it relates to tariffs, because it's my understanding historically, correct me if I'm wrong here, but at one point, Maine had one of the most robust offsite construction industries really in the U.S. And then in the 08-09 crisis, housing crisis, a lot of that pretty much evaporated. And my understanding is a lot of it had to do with trade agreements between us and Canada, and the fact that people were kind of running numbers and saying, hey, if we're going to do anything, we're going to be buying it from Canada because of the exchange rate different, and essentially doing arbitrage when they're buying a house, or buying modular. I mean, and are you seeing impacts from tariffs and our current relationship with Canada, which might become the 51st state, who knows? How is that impacting your business?
Yeah, we're just starting to see early stages of that. I think many throughout the supply chain, are not seeing the impacts yet, but are preparing for them. Especially things like steel and aluminum. Some of those raw materials take 6 months, a year to make their way through the supply chain and really impact the end price of a particular manufactured product. And so as those as those products trickle down, it's going to be months and if not years, that this really has a lasting tail to to these. And unfortunately, I think really what's kind of short-sighted is, yes, we could put tariffs on, on some of the foreign products, but whether it be lumber, whether it be steel, whether it be aluminum, yes, there are domestic suppliers of those, but right now, we for example mostly buy, domestic wood. I think really the only lumber that I bring in from Canada comes from the Arbeck mill. It's OSB. It's just it's local. It's not, and it's not super expensive, and then there's just not any other OSB bills right here nearby. But aside from that, we purchase mostly domestic wood. But the fiber basket that we purchase right now is going to and is getting more expensive because the people that are producer or were historically purchasing that Canadian wood are now saying, all right, well, that's more expensive. I'm going to go purchase the domestic wood, and it's supply and demand, and the price for that becomes escalated. The same is true with steel or aluminum or anything else that we're seeing tariffs on. Those prices are ultimately going to go up, and at the end of the day, that is going to trickle down. We're seeing because we consume the lumber kind of in its raw format as it comes from the mills. We're seeing those prices impacts now, but the price impacts for all those other things that get turned into a manufactured good that we consume, whether it be a sink or a pipe or electrical wire or whatever it might be, that's going to have a tail end impact, over months and years for us.
Yeah. So more to come on that front. Want to talk a little bit about energy codes. Maine has the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code, MUBEC, and there are some updates coming to that. Do all the homes get built to that standard in the factory, regardless of where they're going in the state?
No. So 1 and 2 family homes are built under the state's modular code, which is separate and independent from MUBEC. So the Manufactured Housing Board is the one that drives and dictates the code, and they often look to follow what MUBEC does, but there's certain things that don't make sense in a modular manufactured setting, and they determine what portions of that to adopt, specific to modular.
So if a lot in a community is zoned for a single family home by right, this means to people listening, I buy that piece of land, I go to the town hall, give them my plans, I want to build a building, I can start tomorrow by right. Can I still put a modular home that's built to the Maine offsite code there as well?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. When you're applied for your permit on that, you're applying it under the modular code as opposed to it under MUBEC. A large apartment building with multiple units, that would be done under MUBEC.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So basically, you have a third-party verified person that comes into the factory, looks at all these things, similar to what most folks would consider to be a code enforcement officer in the factory, looking at things so that when it comes out, it's stamped and essentially ready to go. And the local code officer can just make sure the foundation's okay and everything was put together right and then sign off.
That's correct. Yeah. So our, we're licensed as a manufacturer with the state of Maine and other states that we are manufacturing in. And as part of that licensure, we have a third-party agency that is in charge of our quality control. So they assist upfront during the design and engineering and specification portion, and then they're also in our factory routinely inspecting the work that we do. And in the same way that you would be, you might have a local code enforcement officer who's going to the job site and inspecting the electrical or inspecting the plumbing. They're doing those inspections in our factory.
Okay. And I'm wondering, given your background, especially with design on the design side of things, and your front row seat as to how the operations work, are there ways in which we could, let me back up. Would it make sense and would there be any savings to the end user if there were some kind of a modification made to codes that would be safe and so forth, but like reduce costs, or is that just not really going to move the needle much?
Yeah, I think you certainly could. It's similar to the HUD code. The HUD code has different specifications and requirements from an energy perspective, and then also from a space perspective. It's one of the challenges with current code requirements is hallways are required to be a certain width, stairwells are required to be a certain width, closets are required to be a certain size, doorways are required to be certain widths. You're required to have a certain size kitchen, and there's certain things just from a planning perspective that are base requirements that are enshrined within the code, and all those obviously do add cost. And I think those were identified as they developed the HUD code, and those were things that they strategically elected to make exceptions to to allow a product to be delivered more efficiently at a lower cost. And so I think there's as we all look to get creative and find ways to lower the cost of housing, because I think we all agree that housing is just way too expensive. There's not many people that can afford a newly built single family home, unfortunately, anymore. And I think we have to consider creative options like that as we look to do that. And do we need to live in a 2,000 square foot house? No. It can a family live in something smaller? Absolutely. And does it make sense to evaluate those options rather than telling people, sorry, we just there's not a housing option for you? How can we ever say, well, no, we're standing so firm on these requirements that these are the bare minimum that are required, that we're willing to tell people that they've just got to live with the overly inflated price of the current housing market.
I might have mentioned this in our group the other day. I don't know if it was that, but I've said it before. It's like if you go to the store and you want to buy a razor, and you're looking, there's all these razors, right? And there's ones that are $1.50 and there's ones that are like $8, and you're like, I've got like $7 in my bank account. I'm going to buy the $1.50 razor. And the next guy goes in and he has unlimited amount of money in his bank account. And he's like, oh, that $8 razor looks great. I'm going to buy that one. But then next week, the guy shows up who bought the $1 and something razor. And all of a sudden there's a sign on the door that says, we've determined that, the one blade razors are bad for you. So we're not able to sell them anymore. You must buy an $8 razor. And the guy's got $7 in his bank account. He's like, I guess I'm going to grow a beard, And that's, in my opinion, like what we're up against.
Yeah.
It's not that people don't want the better thing, the ideal output. It's that they actually just can't afford it.
Yeah.
And that's really frustrating because, when you're trying to solve this problem, a lot of it just comes down to math. Yet over time, I think very well-intentioned policymakers who, with an eye toward trying to improve the environment and reduce energy cost for the people that are living there, have maybe in some cases intentionally, but I'm guessing largely unintentionally, created a much more vexing problem. Because they've stacked up all these little requirements over time, which have come to the point where it's like, hey, we actually just cannot afford that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's death by 1,000 cuts. And you hit the nail on the head. It's not, no one was trying to drive the price up. It was all very well intentioned. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes when you say that too, like, hey, can we reduce the standards? Some people, unfortunately, have a visceral reaction to that. And they think of, the HUD code homes from the 70s that were just, you would touch something and it would fall apart, or, they were super energy or not very energy efficient. And you would have leaky and drafty windows and paper thin walls, and there's ways to reduce those savings without that. An example for Massachusetts, the new code that's implemented there requires houses to be both solar ready and to have be wired to prep for EV charging. And I fully embrace the technology with EVs. I think they're a great idea, but to require every house that's built to be prepped for EV EV charging, and that adds $1,500, $2,000. With running heavy electrical wire for that, having the upgraded electrical entrance and service for that. You start to understand that, all right, well, that was $1,500 here and $1,500 there, and you do that enough times, and you get there, and you're able to deliver a much more affordable house. And unfortunately, it's all these little things that have all gotten baked in to code requirements that have dramatically escalated the cost of housing.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. I want to end on the future, looking forward to the future. Where do you see some of the biggest opportunities are, not just in Maine, but beyond? Are there kind of any emerging trends, technologies, or kind of markets that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, I think, so offsite manufacturing, offsite construction in general is one that obviously has a lot of interest to me. I'm in the industry, but I think we're really starting to see that grow and evolve. And some of the technologies that really could revolutionize things, whether it be 3D printed houses, other things like that are just they have the potential to reduce the cost of structures by orders of magnitude. And I think as we work to investigate those, it really is doing so with an open mind and embracing those technologies rather than just thinking of them as gimmicky. We as you started out the conversation, we keep doing things the same way, and we keep wondering why we don't change. And we all need to be open to embracing these new technologies and working to try to implement them and develop them as a group. And I think there's a lot of potential. There's also the opportunity to look to other parts of the world. Other parts of the world have dramatically reduced their construction costs and have adopted some of these other offsite technologies, other products, other materials, other means. We're one of the few countries that still largely build with wood. Many other countries, their residential construction is built out of other materials that are more efficient to build with, lower cost to build with, and we still largely are attached to wood frame construction here in the United States. So, do
you guys do anything with metal in the factory at all?
We do a little bit here and there, but again, it's largely I think the public has not accepted other products. So it requires, it's not just us changing things, as we've been talking about, getting builders, getting tradespeople accustomed to working with modular. It's the same challenge with getting people to work with metal. Many of these trades they have tools that are set up to work with wood, not with metal, right? And as you go and you adopt and you implement those, you're having to change processes and procedures all throughout the supply chain. It's not just within our organization.
Yeah, and two, the housing as a product, if you will, is so interwoven with so many other gargantuan industries in our country, right? Yeah. So you want to say, all right, no big deal, I'm swapping that wood out with metal today. Like that impacts insurance, financing, all these other people who are underwriters, all these people have to agree that that's like acceptable. Whereas if I make shoes and I'm like, okay, no more black laces, we're going green. Nobody's like coming to check to make sure that that's compliant with 400 other institutions. I'm overstating the number of institutions, but you get my point, right? And it seems so hard to make change within housing because it is so interwoven with other, players that have vested interest in what that change is.
Well, yeah, that was a great example, right? One of the challenges with the first 3D printed homes were, the idea of insuring it. And, so we've got the home built and now the poor homeowner can't get insurance because the insurance companies just don't know what to do with that. When you have to check off what type of construction it is and you check other, and then they start asking questions, it's, oh, geez, I've got a house, but I can't get insurance. And now I can't, because I can't get insurance, I can't get a loan on that. It's just, it compounds.
Yeah. Well, a lot of good things, Thatcher, today. For folks who are interested in learning more about KBS, where should they go? Yeah,
so you can head to our website or give us a call directly at our main line, and we'd be happy to talk more about about modular construction and what project you might have in mind.
KBS.com?
KBSBuildersinc.com, yes.
Cool. Thanks, Thatcher.
All right, absolutely appreciate it.